You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back, BOOKSTORM Podcast followers. We have something very special for you here today. We bring the best fiction that we know. We bring best-selling fiction, but we vet it, we pick it, we read it. Kristen and I read this book by Denene Millner. It's called One Blood, and we absolutely loved it. So we are honored to have Denene Millner here on BOOKSTORM. Welcome, Denene.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get started, we like to tell our listeners a little bit about you because you have followers in all areas that know maybe a little bit of you, but maybe not the whole wonderful story and all your accomplishments. So I'm going to tell them a little bit. Denene Millner is a New York Times bestselling author and award-winning journalist. She's a TV show host, a podcaster, an essayist. You've seen her in appearances or her work on places like Good Morning America, The Meredith Vieira Show, NPR, New York Times, The Today Show, CBS, CNN, MSNBC. I got to quit because we got to hear her talk sooner or later here. Denene was chosen by Black Voices as one of the 40 influential Black female writers, and for a very good reason. She's had a huge reach with novels, nonfiction titles, celebrity memoirs, and beautiful children's books. Some of these have become feature films and lifetime movies. Now, a good friend of BOOKSTORM Podcast, who we love, Victoria Christopher Murray, has endorsed this book, One Blood. And we love Victoria Christopher Murray. She's been on BOOKSTORM Podcast also. She says about this book, it's haunting, yet wonderfully written. We couldn't agree more. I'm not done talking about our guest author here today because I got to have a few more words. She's also spent a decade working as a columnist, contributing editor, and blogger for Parenting Magazine, then onto her own founding website, mybrownbaby.com, that examines parenting, motherhood through a distinctive multicultural lens. Wow. Her passion for children's books led her to her own imprint, which finally joined with Simon & Schuster, and it's called Denene Millner Books. How impressive is this? This imprint is dedicated to African-American authors and illustrators that celebrate everyday humanity. Okay, now I got to talk about what I saw on your website, because this is where I'm going to get choked up, because this is really wonderful. So she's a Yankee from New York. Hello, so are we. We love everything New York. She's got Southern belle in her soul. She's 100% intelligent Black child, equal parts smart and down to earth with wit, with a smidge of a snob, only in case of emergency. And now I'm going to quote you because this is very, very sweet and very special. Denene says, I'm a lover of my people. We're colorful, hella funny. We're overcomers. We're creators. We're Herculean. We're soldiers. Every last one of us when we put our minds to it. And I'm proud to be among us. I've staked my name, my career on it. It's in my DNA. It's all up in my bones. I'm sure of my talent. I know my worth. What I do with words is pure energy, a gift from the universe. I understand the game. I love it strong. Who am I to waste this? That choked me up because we can all relate to this. Here's what you're doing. Thank you for recognizing your gift and your talent. And thank you for showing all the rest of us how we need to use it. Welcome.
Okay, so your point was to like just make me cry. That's what this was. Like we're gonna make Denene just burst into tears, which I have been doing for like the past few weeks. I like, thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
it's very
Thank
sincere
you.
because you are sincere and authentic. And I had a hard time getting the words out there for a little while because it hits the heart. It
Thank
hits the
you.
heart. Thank you, Denene.
Thank you. It has been my life's work to, I come from a generation and I was raised by a generation that had it even worse than me, where just seeing something like Black people on TV was an event. Like I specifically remember sitting down in my mom's room, my mom and dad in their room in Long Island where I grew up, and like waiting for the Cosby Show to come on. Like all gathering around to watch Good Times and feeling like, oh my goodness, there's Black people on this screen, or picking up the newspaper and being disappointed that there was yet another story of someone being like perp walked across the cover, but then reading, being so just dedicated to knowing what's going on in our world and being ignored in the rest of the pages. And so when I decided to be a journalist, I decided that I would put everything that I had into shining a light on Black folks in a way that I felt like we weren't getting. And so my whole career, I've been doing that. And here we are.
And you're so successful at it. And being a voice at that time and even now, it's not always easy being a voice. It takes a
No,
lot of courage. It
no.
takes a lot of like what you said in your bio. This is my gift. These are my talents, and I'm using them. I'm using them to the full. And
Absolutely.
stand by and watch, everybody. And we are, and we're loving it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Denise, those beautiful sentiments come through loud and clear in your writing, and in particular in One Blood that we're here to talk about today. What a beautiful story. The depth was so incredibly moving. And I like to give our listeners just a little bit of the backdrop of the book. I won't give away any spoilers, but I would love it if you wanted to add anything at the end.
Sure.
So, this story follows the lives of 4 generations of American Black women as they deal with significant challenges from racism to abuse to betrayal. It spans pivotal years in our history, 1965 to 2004. And in your story, we meet Grace, we meet Lolo, we meet Ray, and of course, some of their ancestors and their immediate family members. Now, Grace is a teen living in Jim Crow South, and she experiences extreme loss and is sent to live with an aunt in Brooklyn who disapproves of her country ways and some of her spiritual practices. We also meet Lolo. She was a victim of neglect and sexual violence in her early years, and she has secrets and scars of her own. Now, Lolo is determined to seek protection and stability in her life. She marries who she believes is somebody who's a good man, and she raises a family with him. And she also wants to protect her daughter, Ray, from some of the degradations that she suffered when she was a young woman. Now, Ray sees her mother suffering. She thinks about how she can do things differently, maybe do them better. And as these layers are peeled back throughout your story and as it unwinds, we start to see the ways in which these Black women created ways to move forward. They were looking to how to survive, and they may have taken different paths to get there, but that was the beauty of your story, is seeing how they reacted and how they impacted the next generations. I love this story. It's strength, it's love, it is survival. It is beautiful. Did you want
Thank,
to add anything?
thank you. Thank you. A big impetus for writing the book was my mom. She passed away when I, like, shortly after I gave birth to my younger daughter, who just turned 21. And so my mom has been gone for 21 years. When my older daughter was born, Mari, she's 24, my mom was very close to her. And I saw the way that she related to me and the way that I was able to relate to her changed, right? Like my mom was like Lolo, very strict, had, just a severe fear. It didn't feel like it was fear when I was a kid. It just felt like strictness. But as a grown-up, as a mother, as a woman out in the world, I understand where that fear was coming from and how she thought she was doing her best to protect. You know, when Mari was born, my older daughter was born, my mom became a different kind of person. She became a different kind of mother to me. We became more friends, more peers than we were mom and daughter, you know, be seen but not heard kind of thing. And I wanted to explore all the things that I never got to ask her, you know, in that 3 years that we had where our relationship changed, I still was afraid to sort of dig deeper. And you know, like my background is as a journalist, as you noted. And so I'm naturally nosy and I'm very good at getting people to tell me things and just sort of digging into the truth, finding the truth, no matter how ugly or pretty or difficult or nuanced it is. I just want to see the truth. And I never got to see that with my mom. And so One Blood is very much a meditation on all of the questions that I wished I could have asked her, all of the questions that I have about my own adoption, because I am adopted. And you know, until I wrote the book, I didn't know who my adoptive mother was. I mean, my birth mother was. And so I didn't know anything about my backstory. I still don't really know very much about my backstory, but my birth story. And so you know, like I have a million questions for her on how did, you know, like, what was it like to be pregnant in 1968 at age 17, which it turns out she was when she had me. What did it mean as a Black woman in America to be in that position? And why did you give me away? Was it your own doing? Was I taken away from you? What kind of thought went into this decision that you made that my whole life I looked at as, oh my God, you know, she made the best decision that she possibly could as a mother. I had 2 children in my belly. I know what it means for them to be out of my sight for just a second, much less a lifetime. And so the mettle and the heart and the love that you have to have in order to give your child away, that love that you have to have for that baby is immense. And I wanted to explore that. And so it was very much a matter of me wanting the answers to these questions, asking them of myself. A good novelist asks questions and lets the characters answer them. And that's what I hope that I accomplished with One Blood.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that complexity in those relationships, that's what gave the story such a richness, because we all could identify with different things throughout the story, but exploring those relationships with a parent, with a child, with somebody you may not have ever had the opportunity to know, that was very beautiful in this story. Beautiful.
I can see it. Okay, now this makes total sense to me that you in your life experienced some of these emotions, because you almost couldn't, I don't know if anyone could write this that deep without having felt some of these things. It's sort of blowing my mind right now that you're saying this about your mom and that also that you were adopted, because before we started, Kristen and I were talking and I said, the hardest scenes in here for me, some of them were the orphanages. Yeah. And what happens to those kids. And I can kind of handle things that happen to adults. I can work my way through it. But when it's a child, I don't know, it just does something to me. Right. It really hits hard. So thank you for taking us there. So this goes into my first question, because these are places we need to go. We got to go. So I want to say for our readers, this is one of the most poignant, poetic, but heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, real books I have ever read. Thank you. You shined a bright spotlight on atrocities committed against Black people, especially Black women. And you know what, Denene? It's like it's impossible to tell somebody what we have endured, but through the power of a story, you made us crawl inside these beloved women. You made us walk with them and feel it. This is not an easy thing to do. Thank you. Now, some get choked up through the whole interview. I'll be over here crying. It just hits me so in my heart so strong. You showed us the desperate human need and longing for freedom, not just physical, but mental and emotional. I loved Grace, Lolo, Ray so very much. Lolo said, and I want to quote this: all my life, people have been taking away my choices. Every person who was supposed to protect me caged me up and chained my hands. And as the author of this traumatized, heartfelt, but wonderful woman, what did it take for Lolo to keep fighting, to keep believing? I'll tell you what, I couldn't help but see growth in her. And now that you're telling me about your relationship with your mother in your later years, I saw this in Lolo. She got a little softer in the end. What does it take for any of us to keep fighting that fight?
I think and I'm speaking through tears now because you get it. You get what I was trying to do, and the story that I was trying to tell, and the story that I was trying to tell through these three specific women. Lolo, we got a firm understanding of who Lolo was when we saw her in her own special kind of blossoming when she left South Carolina and moved to New York. And when she got there, she wanted to get to herself. It wasn't so much a matter of recreating herself from and trying to move past all of the things that she'd gone through in South Carolina. It was, I get to be who I want to be here, and nobody can stop me. Nobody can tell me that I can't be a fashion designer. Nobody can tell me that I can't wear short skirts. Nobody can tell me that I can't, think of myself as this, tall live model who is beautiful and, gets to strut in the world. And I see these examples of these beautiful models all around me, like in these magazines. And this is who I am at my core. I'm not what everybody thought that I was supposed to be when I was back in South Carolina. I'm in New York. I get to be who I want to be, and this is who I am, right? But in order to survive, she had to tamp down who she was. She had to tamp down that desire to be her true self. It was a matter of survival. And what we know about Lolo is that she knows how to survive. And every decision that she makes is calculated toward her survival, her own survival, and especially Ray's survival. Of course, she loves her husband. Of course, she loves her son, but it's the little girl that Ray is who she is as a little girl, right? She is the embodiment of, this little human being that needs to be protected, like she wasn't when she was a little girl. And so it's about teaching her daughter how to survive as well. Now, the way that she teaches her, or the way that she guides her isn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that she won't be hurt and harmed, right? But it's how Lolo knows to survive, and she's trying to pass on that to her daughter. And so Lolo grows because that instinct to survive is a matter of wanting to breathe, wanting to be able to, breathe underwater where she thinks that she can save herself, like that this water surrounding her is where she is going to be saved. And she wants to be able to breathe underneath this water of patriarchy, underneath this water of racism, of having to know your place as a Black woman in America, as a woman who, your place is in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, and knowing that she doesn't have the capital to meet the demands of women because she can't have kids. And so she survives the only way that she knows how, and that is to figure out how to breathe with all of that water sort of covering her. And she wants to teach her daughter how to do the same. And the only way that she can do that is what propels her forward. It's her desire to breathe.
Mhm. I love that you said that. And there's a generational strength here that I sense. Like, and sometimes I think this in my own life, like I can't accomplish everything or do everything that I maybe want to in my finite life. But then I've got these kids, and maybe that's like the hope for our future. And I'm going to be gone, but they're still going to be here. And I saw that in this book, like that everyone, that goes into my next question. So I don't want to get in too much, but there's a generational strength that the story doesn't end when I'm over, but I'm passing this along, and maybe there's hope for the future.
Right, right. Absolutely. And, that is a direct result of me knowing that my mothers, both of them, my mother and my birth mother, are constantly around me. Like, and I know this is going to sound weird when I say it, and I'm almost tempted not to, but
Say it.
I can feel them when they're around me, right? Like there's a certain way that my body responds when I know that something or someone else is present. And I have the ability to be able to smell when my mom is around.
Yeah.
Crazy as it is, but it's true. So my mom used to wear this very specific lotion. It was made by Fashion Fair, which was the beauty company of the magazine Ebony, or the company that published Ebony back in the day. And it was a really special treat for her because the lotion was like $12 a bottle. That was a lot of money for a bottle of lotion. And she used that as her, like her base fragrance. And I can tell you a bunch of different times when I've smelled her scent. I've smelled that scent, which they no longer make. And I don't own that I've smelled her in my presence. My father has the ability to do that as well. And I am confident that she is constantly around me and guiding me forward. And so I wanted to bring that into the way that I was telling this story to help people understand, no matter where you come at religion, which way you come at religion, like I grew up in a Black Baptist church. We believed in angels, right? That's no different from where I am now spiritually. And we understand that ancestors are here. It's no different from the angels, just a different word. But we feel like our people are still here with us and guiding us and opening paths where we, think there's a brick wall, and, guiding us gently in different directions so that we can get to where we ultimately should be, right? And so I wanted to bring that to life in the story by you understanding that Grace is surrounded by her family, right? And that Lolo, because she doesn't have the connection to her family, but she has connection to God. She's very religious. So that's what saves her. And then Ray ultimately gets introduced to the idea that her ancestors are with her and feels her birth mother, even though she doesn't know anything about her and never met her and has no details. She still knows that this woman has her back, and her grandmother has her back. And so you constantly see that spiritual underpinning running as a thread through the story, because that's what I was feeling as I was writing it.
You have that in the book with the scent.
Yeah.
And I looked at that for a long time, and I got to let Kristen ask something here because I'm going to get in trouble. But I want to say this. There's not one person I know who has not lost a loved one, including me, my mom and dad, who hasn't seen or heard some sign from them directly after.
Absolutely.
We could talk about this another time, Denene, because I could talk about this for an hour. So that hit every reader. Yes. You know why? I got this theory, because love lasts forever.
Forever.
It's not from this finite world. It doesn't come here. It doesn't stay here. It's something way greater than what we got here. So of course it's going to last forever.
That's right.
Thank you for that.
Right. I believe that deep down in my heart, for sure.
Thank you.
Now I'm getting choked up. Denene, Denene, I wanted to ask you, there's another theme that emerged from your story that really caught my attention. And you highlighted some of the divides within the Black community and how it only added to some of the struggles that many people have faced. There were perceptions of racism of people from the South versus the perceptions of those in the North. There were some issues with dark-skinned Black people versus light-skinned people. And also the perceptions of those who were fighting for civil rights versus those who were thinking more to lay low or assimilate into the prevailing culture. And we saw Ray and her friend Dale have some very strong discussions along those lines, which were fascinating. He didn't think she was doing enough. And she's like, you don't even know what was happening in the Jim Crow South. So how do you even get off saying what you're saying?
Exactly.
Why do you think that humans focus on the things that divide us instead of unite us? And, because I was thinking people of color in this story, especially, had common interests in
Right.
terms of eliminating racism, opportunity, choice. But is that also a reflection of our unique makeup as human beings where we see the world differently? And I wanted
Right.
to ask you what you're thinking.
Wow. Okay. So what I was thinking and that's such a thoughtful question. It really is. And I'm so glad that you saw that. That was, I wrote that because I'm a child of two Southerners who was raised in the North. Right? Like I was raised in the North, but my mother's from South Carolina, my dad's from Virginia. My dad actually lives in Virginia, right on the plot of land that's next door to the house that he was born and raised in. And when I go there, I feel my people, his people surrounding me. And my dad is always telling me and my daughters stories about what it was like growing up in the Jim Crow South. When I was envisioning where Mama and Grace were living, it is my dad's house. It's my dad's yard. It's my dad's land. It's the land that, his people grew up on and raised pigs and chickens on and, kept an ice house and, kept smoked hams underneath the house to last them through the winter. Like my grandmother was a midwife. She was a healer. Those stories about Mama healing, knees with snot and spider webs, that comes directly from my dad. But what also comes directly from my dad is this idea, not an idea, but the fact that when he was growing up in the Jim Crow South, they had their part of the town and white folks had their part of the town. And the Black folks weren't thinking about the white folks. They were a self-contained unit that had their own stores, had their own land, had their own way of being, had their own entertainment, had their own families, had their own friends, had their own baseball fields. And yes, it would have been great if they didn't have to watch the bus with the white kids drive over to the good school, but that didn't negate the fact that they had good lives. And yes, there was racial problems, obviously, in the South, but that wasn't what was always on their mind. Whereas I was raised to believe that if you were Black, you were ready to fight at all times. And that, like the civil rights movement was a movement that included all of us. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And just because we have sort of this idealized notion of what the civil rights movement was and this whole community coming together to fight for our rights, there were different ways that people approached civil rights that didn't involve marching in the streets and, waving a picket sign. Sometimes living your life and enjoying your family and, creating community was a very revolutionary act at a time when people didn't want you to do that, right? And so when you're talking about that scene where Dale and Grace are having this disagreement about how you fight for civil rights, Like he has a very idealized notion, which represents me and my idealized notion that I had about civil rights, right? Growing up and way until I started actually paying attention to what my dad was saying. And, you know, what my dad says about the civil rights movement through, you know, Grace and how she feels about it, because she's actually from where you're fighting, what you're fighting for. That's where she's from. And how are you going to sit there and tell her in her face what it was like? That's where I'm from. I lived it. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, that we see through them and that particular conversation that Black folks are not a monolith, right? That sometimes we come in different colors, we come from different backgrounds, some of us have money, some of us do not, some of us are born in the country, some of us born in the city, some of us are, you know, you pick whatever it is that involves being a human being, and that's the Black community. And all too often we get painted with that same color. And so I wanted very much to show that we are very much a kaleidoscope of colors and ideas, and that, you know, it's not all pretty, it's not all ugly, and we have different ways of entering into a conversation about who we are as human beings. And so I hoped that I was able to do that through these characters. And I really do believe that when we are constantly sort of as humans fighting one another, that it's a human thing. You want people to be like you, and you want people to think like you, because you are who you are and you think like who you are, because you're solid in that. You're going to stand in that. That's your truth. And you want everybody else to stand in it with you. And those who refuse to stand in that truth, or you deem don't have the ability to stand in that truth, you're going to look at them in a judgmental way. And that judgmental look is going to lead to you sort of, you know, clashing over what's right and what's wrong, what's, you know, what works and what doesn't. And I think that's a very human proposition. And, you know, Black folks do it too.
Yeah. Well, you showed that living together and understanding is almost the first step to the opportunity and the freedom and living peaceably.
Right.
And I love that, because understanding comes with understand my situation, get to know me, you know,
Right.
see this and experience this. And that's what you did with your story.
Right.
I
Thank you.
loved it.
Thank you. Thank
In-
you so much.
every ounce of it. There's so much to it, as we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here with some really great issues. I want to talk a little bit more about the parents. Grace, Lolo, Ray, in spite of their hurt and pain, were able to pass on some good to the next generation. Some love, some wisdom, some hope, even that little bag of memories. I love that little bag of memories.
Yeah.
I loved watching the younger generations slowly start to understand their mothers and fathers, see their imperfections, see their sometimes brokenness, but see that they were striving the only way they knew how. They started to see them as people, not just moms and dads. And I loved when Lolo said this: I was a good mother to you. I may not have been touchy-feely or saying it all the time, but I kept you fed. You had clothes on your back, a roof over your head. Maybe I didn't tell you I loved you enough, but I sure showed you. And it really made me think, you know, love comes in a lot of different ways. But how do we, like the new younger generations, how do we move past our past hurt? How do we escape that past and learn to love in a new and better way? Like, is it possible that we could be loving in the way that we wished we always were loved, even if it wasn't shown to us? And then is it possible that maybe we could look at our parents and say, okay, it wasn't what I wanted, but yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. I mean, listen, we all have imperfect parents. Mine are gone now. God rest their souls. I love them to death, but they weren't perfect. And I blatantly tried to do some things the same, but some things different.
Yeah. I'm sorry, because when you read that passage, and you ask that question.
Yeah.
Like that was me speaking to my mom, right? And understanding that was when I'm finally understanding why she was the kind of mom that she was, and wondering why she was never like touchy-feely and huggy. And my dad is the exact opposite, like we could sit and watch a baseball game or watch fight. My dad's a huge sports fan. And my mom would be upstairs, like in the room just away from us. And my dad and I would be downstairs in the basement, like eating ice cream and watching the fights. Like when you see the scene of Tommy teaching Ray how to box, like that was me and my dad, like sitting and watching Tommy Hearns, like use his left, his southpaw to knock people out. Like, and for the longest time, I thought that was how you showed love as a parent. And when I got to that scene, I wrote that because I understood my mom finally, that just because she didn't hold hands or, share ice cream in the mall like my dad didn't mean that she loved me less. She loved me in a way that made me a really, really strong woman, right? And I'm grateful to her for that, but it took me writing that scene and really sort of understanding who Lola was to understand my own mother. And again, ask questions that help me understand her. And so that you read that piece out loud and you're asking that question is really just making me miss her.
Oh, I know.
Wish that I could tell her face to face how much that I love her and I get it now. Yeah.
Hey, we already know she hears you. And you
Yeah.
wrote this whole book with your family's in this book in every kind of way.
Yeah.
And it's just a huge honor for all of them. And, I thought of this when I read that. I thought our parents dealt with other kind of hardships in life just to survive. So maybe in their mind, I'm going to give my child what it takes to survive. I know what it takes to survive. I sometimes say the pendulum swings. Then the next generation comes, they got the food and the clothes now they want something different.
Right.
So then we teach our kids something different.
Right.
And on and on and on it goes.
Right.
But the fact that you showed us, hey, don't discount your parents' imperfections and their brokenness and the way they did stuff. It might not be perfect, but take a closer look at it. Maybe it was really, really pretty darn good compared to what they had that they could offer.
Right. Or that, maybe it wasn't good. But you need to understand why, right? Like you like they are human. Your parents are human. I'm human. And I try to let my daughters know that. And I chose to be a different kind of mother from my mom just because, like I just didn't want them to feel like they didn't have agency in expressing their emotions and being able to come to me with whatever is on their minds. And I also, as like a almost 55-year-old woman, want them to understand that I'm more than just their mother, right? Like I am a woman, I'm a human being. I'm not a machine. I'm not some sort of archetypal, a mom. I am a whole human being. And the only way that they are to know that is if I'm able to open my heart to them and share with them and talk to them in ways that my mother did not for me. And so, if being raised by someone who is not emotionally available to you, but that made sure you had clothes and food and you survived, right? You're still alive. Like there may be hurt and harm that was done, but understand where it came from so that you can at least move forward, right? Like I'm not saying that you have to forget or discount what was done to you. And I don't want for a second for anybody to think that my mother was abusive. She was not. Like I'm sorry, mommy. And I don't want her to think that, or anyone to think that my mother was not a good person. She was a beautiful woman who raised me the best way that she could. And I would not be where I am today if it were not for her grace and strength and love and direction and discipline and all of the things that go into a good mother raising a child, right? I'm just saying that we chose to do it. I chose to raise my daughters differently. I would have liked to have more warmth, more emotion, more hand holding, more hugging. I don't think that that was her way, but she did show me love by being my mother. And so for those who've had a hard time with the way they were raised and the way that their parents parented, it's really about understanding who they are and what went into all of the decision making on how they were going to parent, and then using that understanding to be able to move forward. And maybe there's a need to forgive them, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe
That was
there's
huge. That was
right,
huge in the story too. This
right.
ability to sort of forgive this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Maybe it's understanding that I want to do it differently. And so, but first you have to ask the question. Again, you have to ask the question and be willing to hear the answers when they come to you.
That's some
Yeah.
wise words there for all readers. Thank you, Denene.
Yeah. Denene, I wanted to ask you about one more theme that really struck me very hard. We see women in your story consistently taking on the bulk of responsibility with children, with the housework, with keeping and running a house.
Yeah.
And even when both parents are working, or in Ray's case, only one person was working.
Right.
And we see where some of your characters did this until they reached an end point, where they got to a point where they just kind of fell, either physically or emotionally. And I was thinking that there's a lot of women these days who get to that point where their mind or their bodies betray them because they can't go anymore any further. They're done struggling. And I wanted to ask you, why does it take so much for women to reach that point where they say no more? Do we think men cannot step up to the plate, or is this something in us that we feel it's an example of love to take on so much responsibility and to give our all? What do you
I
think?
think I think that it's about expectation, right? And living up to those expectations, no matter if we want to or not. The society expects women to do it all, period. And when I say society, I mean culture, I mean family, I mean significant others, I mean, just anybody who has any kind of inkling of what a woman does or is capable of doing. The assumption is that we know how to do it and we're going to do it, and that for the rest of us it's an option, right? But for us we have to. And you know I'm divorced now, but in my relationships that I've had since my divorce, I am on the yes, absolutely I can cook, but I didn't come here knowing how to cook. I learned just like you can.
Mhm.
I didn't come here knowing how to keep my house clean. I learned just like you can. I didn't come here knowing how to raise kids and change diapers and, how to do hair and how to mend hems and, cook four-course meal. I learned. And when you say that, I find that when you say that out loud, then it puts context to it. Like I learned because I had to, because nobody else is going to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's because everybody expected me to do it. And if the expectation is there, the expectation gives everybody else a pass to not do it. And I don't know about you, but I don't like living in a dirty house. I wanted to make sure that my kids had what they needed at school. I wanted to make sure that, everybody had sustenance. And if I sat there waiting for somebody else to do it, we'd all starve to death, because the expectation was that I was going to be the one to do it. And so when you look at One Blood, Ray, like Roman expects her to do that. And in some way, Ray expects that she's supposed to do that, because that's the way that she was raised by Lolo, right? Like, the expectation is that you are the one who's going to take care of the house. Now, Lolo's perspective on that comes from her being of a generation of women who couldn't, by law, couldn't have credit cards, by law, couldn't sign a lease or a mortgage without a man's permission and backing. Like, that's where her mentality about you needing to, like, know your worth, and your worth being tied up in what you can do for others. Like, that was her survival. But Ray figures out, thank God, that that's not necessarily her lot. But it is the way that she walks into her marriage with Roman, and Roman is raised to think that way too. And so it's like, well, where's my dinner? And no, I'm not going to clean the house, because it doesn't bother me that the house is dirty, because I never have to clean it anyway. At some point, you're going to do it, because that's the expectation you have for yourself and I have for you. So get to it. Right.
Yeah.
And that is the reality for so many of us. And what I've been practicing doing is letting folks know that I'm not your maid, I'm not your chef, I'm not your babysitter, I'm not your house cleaner, I'm not your, social calendar secretary, or I'm not any of those things. I'm just Denene, and I do what I want for me and my family. And if I don't feel like doing it, if I don't feel like cooking today, I'll hire someone to come clean if I don't feel like doing that. It is not my sole ministry in life to care for other people.
Yeah. And those boundaries are so important, because that allows us to have a healthy, mindset, to be able to be free to, and, be creative, and to do things that bring us joy. Not that our kids don't, but like you pointed out, we are whole people. We're women, independent of being a mother or a spouse or a girlfriend.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, very interesting.
love
That
that.
came through loud and clear.
As women, we love that. I'm a huge believer in women empowerment. But when I say that, I say, because a woman can do anything she wants to do, or nothing if she doesn't want to do it.
Exactly.
Because that did get put on us. Oh, you're going to remember that old song, you bring home the bacon, fried up in the pan.
Right up in the pan, and never let him forget he's a man. Right.
Well, what if I don't want to do all three of those things?
Exactly.
Maybe I do, but maybe I
That's
don't.
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Go out and go have yourself a full-time job, then go down to the grocery store, to the Publix, and pick up the bacon, then bring it back to the house, make sure the kitchen is clean, then cook the bacon, put it on the table, then clean the dishes, and get the kid. And then have to be a porn star, after all of that. Like, stop.
I'm tired.
Right, I'm tired. I want to sleep.
I love that so much. It's just been so much fun, and so importantly wonderful talking to you today, Denene. And before I let you go, I've got to ask you what you're working on next, but I did take a peek, because you got a children's book coming out, When Alexander Graced the Table, co-written by James Beard award-winning chef Alexander Smalls and you.
Yes.
And then you've got another book with a Marvel character, The Queen's Move, which is co-written by Steve Harvey. That's coming out soon too?
I think so. I think that one is coming. The Spider-Man one is definitely coming out in November. I wrote a book called The People Around Us, and it's a story it's a picture book about Miles Morales and his love of art and his Puerto Rican heritage. So that will be out in November. And then When Alexander Graced the Table with Alexander Smalls comes out the following year. And The Queen's Move, we're trying to figure out when that's going to drop. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And thank you what you're doing in the world of children's books, because that is the next generation of eager learners. And was there anything better than a book for a kid to open their eyes up And thank you. And let me just tell our readers, please connect with Denene Millner. You're going to want to follow her. You can find her on her website, denenemillner.com. She's got a fun email that you can sign up for there. She's on Instagram, X, which is formerly Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And we loved having you here with us today.
I
Thanks
love
so much.
being with you. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions, for your energy and your love. I so appreciate the two of you.
We're going to be watching what you're doing next. We hope to have you back on here again.
Thanks
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Denene. What a fantastic discussion with Denene Millner. My goodness. I think we had tears, we had laughter, and we dove down deep into some of these incredibly important subjects that she is tackling in her story, which I cannot even say enough good things about this beautiful, beautiful novel. So Chris, a lot of things jumped out at me in this, of course, because first of all, as women, we relate, but also this idea of understanding what others have walked through, particularly Black people. That was a really important part of this novel, is not telling you what to think, but allowing you to experience what these various characters did. And again, these various characters came from various perspectives, which also adds to that level of understanding that we are trying to gain from their experience. What do you think about
Yeah,
that
I
aspect?
agree, Kristen. Like, there's nothing better than a story. And you know what I love that Denene revealed, that there's a lot of truth in here. You know, as writers, we write about what we know, whether we think we're doing it or not. We put our own perspectives and our own emotions and our own hurts and our own dreams and our own happiness. And when I heard all the people that she knew that some of this was taken away from, it just struck me even stronger. So it's like I said to her, we can't sit and tell somebody what to think. We just can't. And we can't sit and say, well, I went through this and you got to understand. People aren't. But when you write a book and you write it good enough like this, which I told Denene, this is a Pulitzer quality book. You crawl inside these characters and you feel it. And that's the best way to teach somebody. You want to see a different culture? Do you want to see a different time period? You want to know what it was like for somebody else living around the corner from you right now? Pick up a book. It's a treasure. And I have to ask you this. So here's the other thing I touched on a little bit with her. I think one of the hardest things is enduring abuse and then not later suspecting everybody else as being capable of it. So at one point in the book, one of the characters had significant childhood abuse. And when she had her daughter, she was afraid to leave her daughter with any man. And it struck me. I thought, wow, I never thought of that. Of course you wouldn't. Of course you're going to suspect everybody. Why wouldn't you? Because you know the cold, hard truth of what people are capable of. Maybe even the least likely people. You know, when children say I was abused, I think that the statistics are like 90% it's somebody they know, some least likely character. How do you break out of that, though? How do you go through life allowing people into your life when you have been hurt so much, when you trusted and you were hurt? This is a tough one.
Yeah, I thought that was a great, great question. And you and I had been talking about that beforehand. You know, first of all, I think that having a healthy suspicion of everyone is appropriate in this day and age. You know, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And, you know, in my profession and in other professions, you start to see a little bit of the dark underside of everyday people. You know, they're human beings, they're fallible, some of them are evil. And so having a healthy suspicion, especially when you're raising kids, is, I think, appropriate. When it turns into, you know, paranoia or trying to control every movement your children make, I think maybe then you're doing a little more damage. But there is a line there of healthy and appropriate conduct by a parent and paranoia that we've got to tread very carefully through that line. And, you know, I have struggled with that. I have a daughter who I wanted to protect her from everything. But at some point, you have to think in terms of you equip your children to try to handle situations as they get older. You equip them to be able to say no and have boundaries. And that's why I think having the wisdom as you get older is so important in raising kids. Like, I wish I could raise my kids as an older person versus when I first started having kids, because you start to understand that equipping them on the front end is one of the best things you can do. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe that's what grandchildren are for. That now we can do things a little differently. And I want to say this too, because I love this quote and I wanted to bring this up to her, but there wasn't enough time. Lolo taught Ray, where they were talking about houses here, but it meant something more. When one is desperate, you look past what is ugly, what needs fixing, what isn't quite right, and instead focus on the bones of the thing. And so she was talking about relationships, other people. And I looked at that little quote for quite a while. And I said, no, this isn't just about a house. And isn't it true? So maybe we need to do a little of this too. Maybe, I did see the characters in this book, putting up with friendships, spousal relationships, family relationships that weren't perfect, ignoring things that were not abusive, and trying to focus on some good stuff, because we can become so overwrought with focusing on negative in life that we never see the good.
Yeah. Well, I think some of those characters thought that I'm going to work with what I have. This is maybe the best option for survival going forward, knowing I don't have an option to support myself financially, or I won't be able to give my kids the life they deserve. So I'm going to put up with this in a relationship. And I think it's interesting because you were asking about this in some of your questions about these generational issues of doing better and having more options. And I think that's one of the best things we can give our kids is the ability to seek out more options, to not be stopped by obstacles, to go for it, right? Because, past generations did have to make some difficult decisions and go through the analysis that you were just talking about. I can work with this. I'm going to have to put up with this. I'm going to have to compromise here.
Yeah. And, it speaks to who Denene Millner is as a person, because she has been given a lot of gifts and talents and opportunities, and she's utilizing them to the fullest to be a voice for her people. And I hugely admire that. It's a lesson to all of us. Now, before we close, I got to say something, because I was listening to the New York Times book review today, and I love it. It's one of my favorite podcasts, other than BOOKSTORM, of course. And it's hosted by Gilbert Cruz. Shout out Gilbert Cruz. I want to say to you and the New York Times book review editors, I think in a few months, you're going to start picking your 10 favorite books of the year. Some may be fiction, some may be nonfiction. They could all be the same genre. What they do is pretty cool. They each throw books into the pile. It's a Google Doc, and they debate them and fight over them and nitpick them until they come up with the 10 best. Well, guess what, Gilbert? New York Times book review editors, take a look at this book. You are going to love it. One Blood by Denene Millner. And I'm going to leave you with a few storm predictions to pique your interest, or if you want to read ahead, we've got Rebecca Yarros in Fourth Wing, Jacqueline Michard, A Very Inconvenient Scandal, James Rowland's Tides of Fire, Michael Ledwidge, The Girl in the Vault, John Mars, The Vacation, and more.
And listeners, we're growing every week. We thank you for sharing our socials. We love these deep discussions, and we know you do too. We hear from you each week. We would love for you to join us and continue to join us. You can find us on bookstormpodcast.com, on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, on TikTok. And if you would like to see us on the screen, you can go to YouTube and just search for Bookstorm and Podcast, and we should come right up. You can see our fantastic authors. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.